Imagine this. You walk into work one morning, and before you've even settled into your chair, a colleague makes a sarcastic comment about your project. It's not sharp enough to be openly hostile, but it stings. By lunch, you've replayed it a dozen times in your head. By dinner, you've told your spouse or a friend about it. And by bedtime, the words are still echoing, heavy in your chest, stealing the peace you thought you had earned that day. Now let's pause here and ask an uncomfortable question. Did their words really ruin your day, or did you let them? That's the first hook, because we like to believe we are victims of other people's disrespect. But more often than not, we are victims of our own untrained reactions. Here's another truth we rarely admit. Most of us think peace is about living in a world where people treat us kindly, where no one lies, no one disrespects us, and no one ever challenges our worth. But that world doesn't exist. Not at work, not at home, not online. And the more we cling to that illusion, the more fragile we become. That's the second hook. The fragility of a peace that depends on everyone else's behavior. And the third hook is this. You've probably been told to just let it go, or don't let them get to you. But here's the paradox. When someone says that, it almost makes you more irritated. Because letting go is not as easy as flipping a switch. If it were, we'd all be saints by now. Letting go requires something deeper, understanding where the pain comes from, and training yourself to respond from clarity instead of impulse. This is where Stoicism enters the conversation, not as an abstract philosophy from marble statues and ancient scrolls, but as a living practice, relevant for every adult who has ever lost sleep over an insult, a misunderstanding, or a rejection. And here on StoicCraft, we don't talk theory for the sake of sounding wise. We talk about the tools, the mental muscles that let you walk into a storm without being shaken, that let you face disrespect without crumbling, that let you live, not just as a reactor to the world, but as the author of your own response. So let's set the tone clearly. What we're building together is not numbness. We're not aiming to become cold, detached people who pretend nothing hurts. Life will still sting. You will still feel anger, sadness, and disappointment. The difference is whether those emotions own you or you own them. Whether your peace gets hijacked by the next careless comment, or whether it remains yours steady, rooted, untouchable. Think about it. How many times has a single sentence ruined your whole day? How many times have you replayed an argument in your head long after the moment passed, keeping the wound open with your own thoughts? How many times have you stared at the ceiling at night, wishing you had said something clever, something sharp, something that proved you weren't weak? All of that is wasted life. And yet, most of us do it every week. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine you hear the same insult, the same sarcasm, the same cold shoulder, but instead of spiraling, you observe it. You feel the sting, yes, but you let it pass through. You don't clutch it, you don't wrestle with it, you don't build a story around it. You remain calm, steady, even curious. That's not fantasy, that's training. And it's a kind of strength the world desperately needs. For those of us in our 30s and 40s, this is not a luxury skill. It's survival. By this stage in life, we're balancing careers, families, health concerns, and the haunting sense that time is moving faster than it used to. The emotional explosions we could afford in our 20s, slamming doors, burning bridges, raging, online now carry real costs. They damage marriages, alienate children, sabotage careers, and drain the very energy we need to build the life we say we want. That's why emotional sovereignty, the Stoic term for complete self-command, is the real measure of maturity. Not how much money you make, not how many people admire you, but how unshakable you are when the world tries to pull you off balance. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who carried the weight of an empire, once wrote in his private reflections, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This wasn't theory for him. It was survival. And the same is true for us. But let's be clear. This won't come from reading quotes on Instagram. It won't come from nodding along to a podcast like this and then slipping back into old patterns. It will come from training daily, deliberate, uncomfortable training. Just like you don't build physical muscle without resistance, you don't build emotional muscle without facing triggers. The interruptions, the eye rolls, the unfair judgments, they are your weights. Every time you choose calm over chaos, every time you breathe instead of snapping, every time you refuse to hand over your peace, you are getting stronger. And yes, it's hard at first, because you've been conditioned for decades to react. Your nervous system learned patterns from childhood, maybe from parents who exploded in anger, or maybe from years of needing to defend your worth in school, in work, in relationships. By now, those reactions feel automatic, but they are not you. They are scripts. Scripts can be rewritten. That's what we're going to do here. Step by step, principle by principle, we will rewrite the script. We will move from blaming others to investigating ourselves, from collapsing in offense to rising in clarity, from living as fragile reactors to living as steady authors of our own response. And as you listen, I want you to remember this. You're not here because you're weak. You're here because you're strong enough to face the truth that the chaos outside will never stop, but your calm inside can become unshakable. And when you master that calm, the world notices. People may not say it out loud, but they will feel it, the steadiness, the gravity, the quiet power that says, "You can bring me your chaos, but you cannot pull me into it." That's not arrogance, that's mastery. And it's a mastery anyone can learn if they're willing to train. So stay with me. Together we'll dive into the practices, the insights, and the disciplines that will not only change how you respond to others, but how you experience yourself. Because when you learn that peace is not given by the world, but built within, you stop living on emotional autopilot. You stop chasing respect like a thirsty man chasing mirages. You stop giving away your power for free. You become grounded, present, untouchable. And that journey begins right here. If we want to master our peace, the first step is to understand why we lose it so easily. Why does one careless word pierce us? Why does one disrespectful gesture feel like an earthquake inside? The answer isn't that the world is too cruel. The answer is that most of us are living in reaction, not in ownership. Think about a typical day. You wake up determined to stay calm. Maybe you even tell yourself, "Today I won't let anyone bother me." But then your child refuses to get ready for school. Your coworker ignores your contribution in a meeting. or a stranger cuts you off in traffic. Suddenly your whole mood shifts. One moment you're steady, the next moment you're on fire. Why? Did the world really change, or did something inside you get triggered? The truth is that most of us have built fragile identities, mental structures that depend on how others see us. We like to believe we're strong, independent, self-made. But scratch the surface, and you'll see how easily shaken we are by tone, by body language, by silence. Someone rolls their eyes, and it's not just their eyes, it's a message to our nervous system that says, you're not respected, you're not valued. That's why the sting cuts so deep. Now let's be clear, this is not about being weak. This is about being human. From the time we were children, we learned to interpret signals from others as a reflection of our worth. Approval meant safety. Disapproval meant danger. That wiring doesn't magically disappear when we grow up. It hides beneath the surface, waiting for the right trigger. And when the trigger comes, it hijacks us. Here's the critical insight. The event itself is never the whole story. Two people can experience the exact same insult. One shrugs it off and keeps moving. The other spirals for days, replaying it in their mind, fueling resentment. The insult didn't change, it was the same words, the same tone. What changed was the receiver. The insult met a different landscape inside. And this is where the work begins. If you want to stop being ruled by other people's behavior, you have to stop blaming the world for your reactions. The problem is not the colleague, not the spouse, not the stranger online. The problem is the unresolved story inside you that interprets their behavior as an attack on your worth. Aristotle once said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. That doesn't just mean knowing your goals or your preferences. It means knowing the parts of you that are still raw, still unhealed, still desperate for validation, because those are the parts that react the fastest, the loudest, and the most destructively. Let me give you a real-life picture. Imagine a father in his late 30s. He's worked hard all day, carrying stress from deadlines and financial pressure. He comes home and his young child refuses to listen. Instead of calmly guiding the child, he explodes. Later, he feels guilty, wondering why he lost control over something so small. The truth is, his anger wasn't about the child. It was about the unresolved frustration already boiling inside. The child was just the spark that lit the fire. We all carry these sparks. Maybe for you, it's the memory of not being heard as a kid. Maybe it's the pressure to always appear competent at work. Maybe it's the hidden fear that you're not enough as a partner or a parent. And every time life brushes against that spark, the reaction feels automatic, overwhelming, uncontrollable. But here's the hope. Reactions are not destiny. They are patterns, and patterns can be changed. The first step is noticing them. To step back even for a moment and say, this surge of anger, this sting of offense, it's not them. It's something in me that got touched. That's where self-knowledge begins, and that's where ownership starts to grow. It's uncomfortable, yes, because it's always easier to blame others. It's easier to say, they disrespected me. They made me angry. They ruined my day. But every time we do that, we hand over the keys to our emotional state. We let the world drive us into chaos. And then we wonder why we feel powerless. But imagine a different posture. Imagine being like a mountain in a storm. The wind howls, the rain crashes, lightning strikes, but the mountain doesn't move. That's what emotional sovereignty feels like. Not coldness, not indifference, but a rootedness so deep that other people's chaos can't pull you under. Think of it like a house. If your walls are full of cracks, any storm outside will shake the whole structure. But if your foundation is solid, the same storm barely rattles the windows. Most of us spend our lives trying to control the weather instead of strengthening the foundation. We beg people to be nicer, to treat us better, to avoid saying things that hurt. But the storms will always come. The wiser path is to reinforce the walls inside. This is why the Stoics emphasized ownership. Epictetus taught that the only true control we have is over our thoughts, our actions, our choices. Everything else, what people say, what they do, how they treat us, is outside our control. If you tie your calm to what others do, you'll never be steady. But if you anchor it to what you allow inside, nothing can move you. Let's bring it closer to daily life. Imagine your partner snaps at you after a stressful day. Your reflex might be to snap back, escalate, and turn a small spark into a house fire. But pause. Ask yourself, did they make me angry? Or did their words bump into my need to feel appreciated? Once you see the difference, you can choose. You might still set a boundary. You might still say, I don't deserve to be spoken to like that, but you'll say it from steadiness, not from fire. And that difference changes everything. Because here's the truth. When you believe others make you feel, you're handing them your strings. Every sarcastic remark becomes a leash. Every criticism becomes a chain. Every silence becomes a cage. But when you see that your response is yours, you cut the strings. You're no longer a puppet. You're a person, grounded, aware, free. For people in their mid-30s to mid-40s, this shift can be life-changing. At this stage, your time and energy are precious. You don't have the luxury of wasting days spiraling in resentment. You can't afford to burn bridges at work or poison your home with unchecked anger. Emotional ownership isn't just philosophy. It's survival. It's what allows you to navigate the pressures of adulthood without collapsing under them. So the next time you feel that heat rising, remember, they didn't put it there. They only lit the match. The fuel was already inside. And that's good news because it means the solution is inside too. Instead of saying they made me angry, try saying, I noticed anger rising in me. That one sentence turns the whole storm into a signal that there's still work to do inside. And isn't that what growth is? Not eliminating every rude person from your life, but learning to be so rooted that their rudeness no longer defines you. Not silencing every critic, but learning to hear criticism without collapsing. Not controlling every environment, but controlling the one thing that was always your response. Because in the end, the world doesn't decide who you are. You do. And the moment you stop giving away your permission, you stop being tossed around like a leaf in the wind. You become the tree, strong, steady, unshaken. If anger and offense come from within, not from outside, then the obvious question is, what exactly is inside me that reacts so fiercely? To answer that, we must take the first step of every serious journey of growth, self-knowledge. The ancients called it Gnothe Soten, know thyself. And Aristotle reminded us, Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. But what does knowing yourself really mean? Too often we reduce it to surface-level traits. I like this food, I dislike that music, I'm an introvert, I'm a leader. But real self-knowledge goes far deeper. It means knowing the hidden contracts you live by, the wounds you carry, the unspoken needs that shape your reactions. It means seeing not just the mask you show the world, but the raw face underneath. Think about it. Have you ever snapped at someone and then thought, why did I overreact like that? That question is a clue. It reveals that your outburst wasn't about the surface issue. It came from a deeper place. Self-knowledge is the work of tracing the outburst back to its root. Maybe your anger wasn't about being interrupted. It was about your lifelong fear of not being heard. Maybe your sadness wasn't about being overlooked at work. It was about the story you tell yourself that you're invisible unless you succeed. Without this awareness, you live on autopilot, enslaved by patterns you don't even see. With it, you begin to notice the triggers for what they are, signals pointing to what still needs healing. That's the power of self-knowledge. It turns every emotional storm into a compass, guiding you toward growth. Let's put this into context for adulthood. By the time you reach your mid-30s or 40s, you've collected decades of experiences, family dynamics, workplace pressures, failed relationships, cultural expectations. All of these shape how you interpret the world. If you don't take time to examine them, they control you from the shadows. That's why so many adults feel like they're repeating the same conflicts again and again. Different faces, different places, but the same fights. Why? Because the common denominator is you. But here's the good news. Once you turn the light inward, patterns lose their power. Imagine a man who constantly feels dismissed by colleagues. At first, he blames them. They don't respect me. They never value my input. But when he digs deeper, he realizes this sensitivity comes from growing up with a father who rarely acknowledged him. The workplace is just the stage, the old wound is the script. Once he sees that, he can stop demanding that coworkers heal what his father never gave. He can take ownership, begin to separate past from present, and respond differently. That's self-knowledge in action. Not just identifying traits, but uncovering the root causes of your reactions. And when you do this, something profound happens. You stop being so easily manipulated by life. An insult doesn't spiral you into despair because you know, this touches my need for approval, but I don't have to feed it. A criticism doesn't send you into rage because you can say, this triggers my fear of inadequacy, but I can breathe through it. Self-knowledge is like turning on the lights in a dark room. Suddenly, the shadows that once terrified you lose their power. You see the furniture for what it is. You stop bumping into things, and you realize most of the monsters were illusions created by your own mind. Now, let's be honest. This isn't comfortable work. It's easier to keep blaming others, easier to stay in the familiar story. People are disrespectful. That's why I'm angry. But comfort never created strength. If you want to be unshuckable, you must be willing to sit with discomfort. You must be willing to ask, what is this reaction teaching me about myself? And here's a truth that might surprise you. Anger is often a mask. Beneath anger, there's almost always fear, sadness, or shame. The outburst is just the armor. Self-knowledge means looking beneath the armor and naming what's really there. Maybe the criticism at work doesn't just make you angry, it makes you feel exposed, afraid of being seen as less capable. Maybe the coldness in your partner doesn't just irritate you, it awakens the old fear of being unlovable. Until you name it, the anger will keep showing up like a decoy, distracting you from the real work. For adults in their 30s and 40s, this process can be life-changing. At this stage, your life is too valuable to waste on unconscious loops. You can't afford to keep reacting like a teenager when your marriage, your career, your children depend on your steadiness. Self-knowledge becomes not just a philosophical exercise, but a necessity for survival. It's the difference between repeating generational patterns and breaking them. And let's address something practical. How do you actually practice self-knowledge? It begins with slowing down, journaling your reactions instead of rushing past them, noticing your body when anger rises, tight chest, clenched jaw, shallow breath, and asking, what's the story behind this tension? It means listening to your inner critic and challenging it. Whose voice is that really? Is it mine or something I absorbed years ago? You don't need a therapist to start this journey, though therapy can help. You just need honesty and courage. The courage to look inward instead of outward. The courage to admit that the battlefield is not your boss or your spouse, but your own unexamined beliefs. And when you begin this work, something shifts in your presence. People feel it, even if they can't name it. They sense that you are not as easily rattled, not as easily baited. They sense that you have roots they cannot see. And that steadiness commands respect, not the loud, demanding kind, but the quiet, undeniable kind. Because here's the paradox. The more you know yourself, the less other people can control you. The insults lose their sting, the disrespect loses its grip, the chaos loses its power. You still feel it, yes, but you don't collapse under it. You don't confuse the trigger with the truth. And that is the beginning of real strength. Not the strength to dominate others, but the strength to master yourself. The strength to walk into conflict and remain calm. The strength to hear criticism and remain open. The strength to face disrespect and remain whole. Self-knowledge is not just the beginning of wisdom. It's the foundation of freedom. And until you build that foundation, every storm will shake you. But once you do, you discover something life-changing. Peace was never out there. It was always waiting inside you, hidden beneath the noise, waiting for you to notice. One of the most liberating truths you can ever realize is this: you are not your emotions. You experience anger, but you are not anger. You feel sadness, but you are not sadness. You notice fear, but you are not fear. The difference may sound small, but it's the line between being enslaved by emotions and being free to choose how you respond. Most people never make this distinction. They fuse their identity with whatever they feel in the moment. I'm furious. I'm devastated. I'm broken. Notice the language. It's not I feel anger. It's I am anger. Not I feel sadness, but I am sadness. The problem with that identification is obvious. If you believe you are your emotions, then every time anger rises, it owns you. Every time sadness surfaces, it defines you. Every time fear appears, it limits you. But emotions are not who you are. They are visitors. They come, they stay for a while, and then they leave. Just like clouds moving across the sky, they pass. You are the sky. They are the weather. The sky is not destroyed by a storm. The sky holds it, allows it, and remains unchanged when the storm passes. That's the image to keep in your mind. You are the sky. Think about a time when you were angry. In the heat of the moment, it felt like anger was everything. It colored your thoughts, it shaped your body, it drove your words. But notice, where's that anger now? It's gone. If you were anger itself, it would still be here. But it's not, because emotions are transient. They rise, they fall, they dissolve. The problem isn't that emotions exist. The problem is that we mistake them for who we are. Let's bring this closer to daily life. Picture someone in their late 30s who is under pressure at work. A colleague criticizes their project, and they feel anger surge. If they identify with the anger, they lash out, send a harsh email, damage a relationship. If instead they recognize, I notice anger arising in me, something changes. They create space. They observe instead of fusing. And in that space they can choose pause, breathe, reframe, respond with clarity. The situation is the same, but the outcome is completely different. This is the core of emotional mastery, disidentification. To step back and say, I feel this, but I am not this. It's like holding a hot coal in your hand. If you believe the coal is part of you, you cling to it and get burned. But once you realize this is just something I'm holding, you can set it down. The Stoics practiced this constantly. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Notice what he's saying. Your mind is yours. Your thoughts, your emotions, your impulses, they arise, but they don't define you. You can witness them without obeying them. Now, this doesn't mean suppressing emotions. Suppression is just another form of identification. It says, if I let myself feel this, it will overwhelm me. True mastery is the opposite. It's allowing yourself to feel fully without being consumed. To let anger rise, acknowledge it, and let it pass. To let sadness visit, sit with it, and let it leave. To let fear knock on the door, observe it, and let it go. Suppression is resistance. Disidentification is freedom. For adults in their 30s and 40s, this lesson is especially powerful. At this stage, emotions often run high. The stakes of life are real careers, marriages, children, health, aging parents. You don't have the luxury of being dragged into every emotional storm. If you identify with every surge of irritation, disappointment, or fear, you'll burn yourself out. But if you can create space, if you can say, I notice this feeling, but it's not me, you preserve your energy. You respond with clarity instead of chaos. Here's an exercise to try. The next time you feel a strong emotion, name it out loud. I feel anger. I feel sadness. I feel fear. Notice the difference between saying, I am angry, and I feel anger. One fuses your identity with the feeling. The other reminds you it's temporary. This simple shift in language can rewire your relationship with emotions. Over time, you begin to notice the gap, the space between you and what you feel. And in that space lies freedom. Think of it like watching a movie. When you're immersed, you feel every twist, every shock, every tear. But at some level, you know, this is just a movie. That awareness keeps you grounded. Life is similar. The emotions feel overwhelming in the moment, but if you step back, you realize this is just a passing scene in the larger story of me. You don't deny it. You don't minimize it. But you don't confuse the scene for the whole movie. And here's the paradox. When you stop fusing with emotions, you actually feel them more clearly. You're no longer fighting them, no longer suppressing them. You allow them to move through, and because you're not clinging, they pass more quickly. Anger that might have burned for days now dissolves in hours. Sadness that might have lingered for weeks now flows in days. Freedom doesn't come from denying emotions. It comes from refusing to let them define you. This practice can transform not only your inner life but also your relationships. Imagine a spouse who snaps at you. If you identify with the hurt, you lash back, escalating the conflict. If you disidentify, you notice, I feel hurt rising in me. You breathe. You recognize the feeling without fusing. You respond calmly, maybe even with compassion. The conflict de-escalates. The relationship strengthens. The difference is not in what your spouse said, it's in how you held your own emotion. And isn't that the essence of maturity? To stop living as a slave to every mood, every trigger, every passing storm. To live instead from a steady center, observing emotions as weather, not as identity. Because here's the ultimate truth. You are not the storm. You are the sky. Wide, steady, expansive. Emotions are the winds, the rains, the clouds. They come and go, but the sky remains. When you remember this, you stop fearing emotions. You stop being hijacked by them. You learn to watch them, feel them, and let them pass. And once you know that, you discover a power few people ever find, the power to be free in the middle of chaos. To feel deeply without being drowned. To face storms without losing yourself. That is what it means to realize you are not your emotions. If the root of our reactivity lives inside us, then the fastest way to change the outcome is to change the question we ask in the heat of the moment. Most of us default to the wrong question. Why are they like this? That single sentence pulls us into a spiral of blame, fantasy, and helplessness. We start analyzing their motives, trying to play detective in their psychology, and building courtroom cases against them. The result is predictable. We feel powerless, angry, and stuck. The wiser path is to swap that question with something that gives us ownership. Why does this sting me so much? What inside me is being touched? How do I want to respond in a way I will respect tomorrow? The difference seems subtle in words, but in practice it transforms the entire experience. When you ask why, you fuel anger. When you ask what or how, you create options. Take the workplace as an example. You share an idea in a meeting and a colleague dismisses it. If your inner voice shouts, "Why are they disrespecting me?" you will likely tighten your body, speak defensively, and leave the meeting feeling bruised. But if you pause and ask, "What belief of mine just got poked?" you may realize the comment challenged your hidden contract. If I am competent, I must never be wrong. Suddenly you see the reaction for what it is, a tender spot inside you. From there you can shift course, ask a clarifying question, or even thank the person for challenging you. The external event is the same, but your question rewrote the outcome. Parenting offers another example. Your child resists a simple request. And immediately your reflex is, why are they so difficult? But a better question would be, what do I most want to teach in this moment? If the answer is self-control, then modeling calm becomes the lesson. If the answer is respect, then firm boundaries without cruelty are the best response. Questions shape our focus, and our focus shapes our behavior. Over time, those behaviors shape our children more powerfully than any lecture could. The same principle applies to intimate relationships. When your partner forgets something important, the reflex question is, why don't they care about me? That question tempts you into accusation and mind reading. But a wiser sequence begins with, what expectation of mine was just violated? How can I name this clearly without blame? The difference between prosecution and precision is enormous. Instead of saying, you never pay attention, you might say, when plans change at the last minute, I feel unimportant. What I need is a quick heads up. The second question preserves dignity and opens the door to repair. To live this way, you must actually prepare your mind with better questions before the storm comes. In practice, you can carry a short inner menu of questions. When you feel triggered, you can ask, what exactly was touched in me? Status, belonging, fairness, control, safety. Labeling it shrinks the monster. You can ask, what outcome do I want in 1 hour, 1 week, 1 year? That frame interrupts the urge for short-term victory and shifts you toward long-term wisdom. You can ask, what is in my control right now? And suddenly the noise fades, leaving only your words, your tone, your posture, and your breath as choices. You can ask, what value do I want to embody? Clarity, courage, kindness, or discipline? And let that single word steer your behavior. You can even ask, what is the smallest next right action? And trust that one breath, one pause, or one clear sentence is enough to move forward. Notice how all these questions turn you inward, not in a self-blaming way, but in an empowering way. They remind you that your emotions are signals, not verdicts, and that your choices remain yours no matter what others do. Old questions like, why is this happening to me? Keep you stuck in self-pity. New questions like, how can I meet this well? Place you back in authorship. And if you want an especially powerful reframe, try asking, how would the best version of me handle this? That single question pulls your higher self into the room. In conflict. Another effective tool is to practice the kindest plausible interpretation. Instead of demanding, why are they always so hostile? You can ask, what's the kindest plausible explanation? Perhaps the sharp email was rushed, not malicious. Perhaps the curt tone was exhaustion, not contempt. This doesn't mean you abandon boundaries. It means you protect your peace while still seeing humanity in others. From there, you can set limits calmly instead of lashing out. And here's a critical reminder. New questions don't erase emotions instantly. They don't flip a switch and make the anger vanish. What they do is create space. They slow the surge long enough for you to choose. Imagine you're about to send a furious text. If you ask, what story am I telling, and what facts am I ignoring? You might see that you've exaggerated the offense. Or if you ask, can I let the first wave of emotion pass before I speak? You might wait 90 seconds, breathe, and discover that your response doesn't need to be sharp after all. Emotions are weather, and the first wave is often the loudest but briefest. Better questions help you ride the storm instead of drowning in it. This practice is especially crucial in professional life. In your late 30s and 40s, your reputation is fragile but precious. The questions you ask under stress can either build credibility or destroy it. If you default to "who's to blame?" you will alienate colleagues. If instead you ask, "what process failed and how do we improve it?" you build respect. If you ask, "why don't they get it?" you sound arrogant. If you ask, "how can I make the next step unmistakably clear?" you sound like a leader. Questions turn workplace chaos into opportunities for influence. There's also the question of future perspective. When you feel tempted to lash out, ask, "what would my future self thank me for tonight?" That one habit can save marriages, preserve careers, and protect friendships. Your future self rarely thanks you for the cutting remark. It often thanks you for patience, silence, or a measured question. Asking the future for advice before the present decides is one of the most practical tools for maturity. Even when you set boundaries, questions change the tone. Instead of shouting, "why are you always like this?" you can calmly ask yourself, "what behavior will I not allow, and how will I communicate that?" A clear statement, "if you raise your voice, I will end the call and continue later," protects your dignity without drama. Questions turn boundaries from weapons into clarity. The practice doesn't need to be complicated. Each morning, you can rehearse with simple pre-questions. What is likely to test me today? How will I practice calm when it happens? What value word will guide me? That preparation is not pessimism. It is training. It is mental prehab, so when the trigger arrives, you're not surprised you're ready. The truth is, life will never run out of opportunities to provoke you. Colleagues, children, spouses, strangers, someone will always do something that could knock you off balance. But the difference between living as a victim and living as a master lies in the questions you ask yourself in those moments. Poor questions trap you. Wise questions free you. And when you train your mind to reach for the right ones, you stop being jerked around by every storm. You become the mountain again, strong, steady, unmoved. Change the question. And you don't just change a conversation, you change your trajectory. You shift from chasing respect to embodying it, from demanding safety to generating it, from being tossed like a leaf to being rooted like a tree. This is not theory. This is training. And it is training you can start right now, with the very next breath and the very next conflict. By simply asking a better question. If there's one lesson the Stoics insisted on, it's that mastery doesn't arrive in a flash of insight. It comes through training. Just as no one wakes up with a strong body without consistent exercise, no one wakes up with an unshakable mind without deliberate practice. Emotional strength is a muscle, and like every muscle, it grows when you challenge it, stress it, and give it time to recover. The mistake most people make is believing that composure should come naturally, that if they were truly mature, they would simply never get angry. But that's like expecting yourself to lift heavy weights the first time you walk into a gym. Strength is not the absence of weakness. It's the result of training. Every moment of irritation is a repetition. Every trigger is a set. Every time you choose not to lash out, you've just done one more rep for your emotional muscles. The traffic jam that tests your patience, the sarcastic remark that tempts you to fire back, the unexpected delay that stirs your frustration, all of these are opportunities to train. Most of us waste them by collapsing into the reflex reaction. But those who see life as a gym for the soul grow stronger with each challenge. Think of it this way: you don't complain when weights feel heavy at the gym. You expect them to be heavy. That's the point. In fact, you know the weight is what makes you stronger. So why complain when life feels heavy? Why curse the difficult colleague, the impatient child, the unfair boss? They are the weights. They are what force you to build resilience. Without them, your emotional muscles stay weak. Every inconvenience is a workout. Every offense is resistance training. When you start to see it that way, the whole game changes. Let's make this practical. Imagine you're cut off in traffic. Your old reflex is to honk, curse, and stew for 20 minutes. But if you treat it as a workout, you notice the surge of adrenaline, and instead of indulging it, you breathe deeply, release the tension in your hands, and say to yourself, "This is my rep." You don't need to thank the reckless driver, but you can thank the opportunity to train. Multiply that by dozens of small moments a week, and over months you'll notice you no longer get hijacked as easily. Your baseline calm has grown stronger. The same principle applies at work. A colleague interrupts you. Instead of collapsing into irritation, treat it as resistance. Pause, let them finish, and then calmly re-enter the conversation. Or maybe you're blamed unfairly in front of others. Instead of rushing to defend yourself, take one breath, steady your tone, and respond with measured clarity. These moments sting, yes, but they also strengthen. Every time you don't give away your power, you're adding weight to your bar. Training also means consistency. You can't go to the gym once and expect lasting change. You have to show up again and again, even on days you don't feel like it. The same is true for emotional mastery. It's not about a single heroic display of calm. It's about the small daily choices to breathe instead of snap, to pause instead of lash out, to observe instead of identify. Over weeks and months, these repetitions accumulate. And just like physical training, the progress is slow but undeniable. One day you realize that the situations that used to derail you no longer have the same grip. What once knocked you down now barely shakes you. There's another truth about training. It hurts at first. Just like sore muscles after lifting weights, your ego will feel sore when you resist the urge to fight back. You'll feel the itch to react, the burn of holding your tongue, the discomfort of letting an insult pass without retaliation. That discomfort is not failure, it's growth. It means you're stretching beyond your old patterns. The soreness is proof of progress. And here's the paradox. Over time, what once felt unbearable becomes natural. Just like lifting weights that once seemed impossible becomes easy. Holding your composure in situations that used to overwhelm you becomes second nature. You build endurance. You build strength. And others notice. They may not know what changed, but they'll sense that you no longer get pulled into every storm. They'll feel the steadiness radiating from you. This training mindset also frees you from perfectionism. Too many people quit because they think mastery means never losing your temper. But no athlete expects to lift flawlessly every session. No one expects to never miss a rep. They expect to fail sometimes, and they know failure is part of training. The same is true here. You will still get angry. You will still overreact. The difference is that instead of shame, you see it as feedback. You ask, what can I learn from this rep? How can I improve next time? And then you try again. That's how growth happens, not in perfection, but in persistence. Let's also acknowledge recovery. Just as physical muscles need rest, your emotional muscles need reflection. Journaling, meditation, quiet walks, these are the recovery sessions for the soul. They allow you to integrate the lessons, to heal the micro tears from training, and to prepare for the next challenge. Without recovery, training becomes burnout. With recovery, training becomes transformation. For those in their 30s and 40s, this approach is vital. Life at this stage is demanding careers, families, health, financial responsibilities. You don't have the luxury of uncontrolled reactions. Every outburst costs you something: relationships, credibility, peace of mind. Training your emotional muscles isn't just about self-improvement. It's about survival. It's what keeps your home calmer, your work steadier, your health stronger. The energy you save by not wasting it on rage becomes energy you can invest in building the life you want. And remember, training isn't glamorous. It happens in the small, ordinary moments. It happens when your child spills milk and you choose patience. It happens when your partner is short-tempered and you choose compassion. It happens when a stranger insults you online and you choose silence. Each choice feels small in the moment, but over time, it reshapes your entire character. Just like lifting a dumbbell doesn't transform your body overnight, one act of patience won't transform your soul, but thousands of reps stacked day after day will dot so the next time you feel provoked, reframe it. Don't say, "Why is this happening to me?" Say, "This is my workout." Don't say, "I can't believe they're like this." Say, "This is my rep for today." And then breathe, pause, choose clarity over chaos. You won't always succeed, but every time you try, you grow stronger. And one day, you'll look back and realize you've built something few people ever achieve: the ability to remain calm in the middle of storms, not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. That's the power of training. Not sudden enlightenment, not instant peace, but steady, deliberate growth, rep after rep, day after day, until your emotional muscles are strong enough to carry you through anything. One of the hardest truths to accept, yet one of the most liberating, is that peace will never come from controlling other people. Most of us spend enormous energy trying. We want our coworkers to respect us, our children to behave, our partners to speak kindly, strangers to treat us with courtesy. We tell ourselves that once they change, we'll finally feel calm. But have you noticed? The world rarely cooperates. And so our peace rises and falls like a stock market chart, fluctuating with the behavior of people we can never fully manage. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus put it simply: there are things within our control and things beyond it. Within, our thoughts, our choices, our actions. Beyond, the opinions, behaviors, and emotions of others. To confuse the two is to guarantee misery. Yet confusion is exactly what most of us live in. We try to bend the external world to match our preferences. We beg, we persuade, we manipulate, we explode. And even if it works temporarily, the peace never lasts, because the next moment someone else will act in ways we dislike. Think about the endless frustration of traffic. You can curse every reckless driver on the road, but not one of them will change because you shouted in your car. Or think of the coworker who constantly interrupts you. You can glare, complain, or plot revenge, but in the end, their behavior belongs to them. Your peace cannot depend on their self-awareness. Or think of the partner who doesn't always meet your emotional needs. You can demand, you can sulk, you can nag, but the truth remains, you cannot script another person's soul. When we try to control others, we step onto a treadmill of exhaustion. The world is too big, people are too unpredictable, and life is too complex. You will never get everyone to treat you the way you think you deserve. And the more you cling to that fantasy, the more brittle you become. One sarcastic remark shatters your day. One act of disrespect ruins your week. One betrayal convinces you life is unlivable. That's not peace, it's hostage-taking. You've tied your serenity to forces you cannot command. But here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying to control others, you actually regain control of yourself. Instead of saying, I need them to respect me before I can feel calm, you say, I can feel calm regardless of what they do. Instead of saying they need to apologize before I can move on, you say, I can choose to release resentment even if they never change. That's not weakness. That's strength of the rarest kind. Because anyone can feel peaceful when the world bows to their preferences. Only the truly strong can feel peaceful when it doesn't. Let's bring this closer to life in your 30s and 40s. By this stage, you've likely learned that people are stubborn. Colleagues resist feedback. Children test boundaries. Parents repeat the same criticisms. Friends let you down. Spouses have moods. If your peace hinges on reforming all of them, you'll spend decades fighting unwinnable wars. But if you accept that they are who they are and reclaim your power to choose your response, you free yourself. You stop carrying the impossible burden of managing everyone else's growth. You begin living your own. This doesn't mean becoming passive or accepting mistreatment. It means drawing a line between what belongs to you and what belongs to others. Their choices are theirs. Your boundaries are yours. They may speak harshly. You may choose not to tolerate it. They may be disrespectful. You may walk away. They may break promises. You may adjust your trust. But notice, in all of this, you are managing your side, not theirs. You are choosing clarity instead of control. It also means releasing the fantasy of universal approval. Many of us secretly carry the belief that if we are good enough, kind enough, competent enough, everyone will like us. And when someone doesn't, we see it as evidence that we failed. But no matter how perfectly you live, some people will misunderstand you, envy you, or simply dislike you. Their perception is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to live aligned with your values, not their preferences. Think about how much energy you would save if you stopped trying to manage everyone's opinion. No more rehearsing comebacks in your head. No more obsessing over what they think. No more sleepless nights plotting how to make them change. That energy could be invested in growth, in creativity, in relationships that nourish you. Every ounce of energy wasted on controlling others is an ounce stolen from building your own life. And here's a deeper truth. When you stop trying to control others, you paradoxically influence them more. People resist being managed, but they are drawn to steadiness. When you stop reacting wildly, when you remain calm and consistent, people notice. They may not say it, but they feel it. They feel the gravity of someone who is not shaken by their chaos. And in many cases, your composure invites their respect far more than your attempts to force respect ever could. So the next time you find yourself trying to fix, manage, or manipulate someone else's behavior, pause. Remind yourself, that's their side of the street. This is mine. Clean your side. Keep it clear. And if their side is too messy, you have the freedom to set boundaries or walk away. That is far more powerful than endless arguments designed to bend them to your will, because in the end, peace is not found in the obedience of others. It's found in the discipline of yourself. The moment you let go of the illusion that everyone must respect you, love you, or understand you before you can be calm, you step into freedom. You stop living as a hostage to their moods and choices. You begin to live as a sovereign of your own mind. That's the heart of Stoic wisdom. Control what is yours. Release what isn't, and watch how light you feel when you finally set down the burden of controlling what was never yours to carry. If there's one invisible trap that quietly steals our peace more than almost anything else, it's expectation. Not the healthy kind of expectation, the kind that sets goals, plans for the future, and motivates action, but the hidden contracts we write in our minds, the silent rules we demand others follow without ever telling them. These invisible contracts create disappointment after disappointment, leaving us bitter and exhausted, all because we expect life to unfold on our terms. We all carry them. We expect our partners to know what we need without us saying it. We expect our coworkers to work as hard as we do. We expect our children to behave according to the values we hold most dear. We expect our friends to always remember the important dates. We expect society to reward our effort with recognition. And when those expectations aren't met, we feel not just let down but insulted, as though the universe has broken a promise. The truth is, the universe never signed the contract. The people in our lives never signed it either. We wrote it silently in our heads, then grew resentful when others didn't play along. Imagine a husband who spends weeks planning a thoughtful anniversary surprise. He expects his wife to respond with overwhelming gratitude and affection. But when her reaction is simply polite appreciation, he feels crushed. Not because she was unkind, but because his private expectation wasn't met. Or imagine a manager who stays late night after night, expecting his boss to notice and reward his dedication. When no recognition comes, he feels invisible, even betrayed. But again, the boss never signed that contract. The expectation was self-created. The problem with expectations is that they move silently from hope into entitlement. Hoping your partner will understand you is human. Expecting them to read your mind and resenting them when they don't is toxic. Hoping your child will listen is natural. Expecting them to embody perfect patience when they're still learning emotional control is unrealistic. Hoping your career will reward your effort is reasonable. Expecting the world to always be fair is a recipe for bitterness. The Stoics saw this clearly. They taught that suffering often comes not from what happens, but from what we expected to happen. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that people would be selfish, rude, arrogant, and ungrateful, and by expecting it, he was never surprised. He didn't lower his standards for himself. He lowered his illusions about others. That way, when kindness came, it felt like a gift, not an obligation. For those in their 30s and 40s, this lesson is especially vital. At this stage of life, we often feel the weight of responsibility. We pour ourselves into our careers and expect recognition. We sacrifice for our families and expect gratitude. We show up for friends and expect loyalty. And when these expectations aren't met, the disappointment feels heavier than ever. But here's the reality. Life doesn't run on our private scorecards. The people around us are often too caught up in their own struggles to meet every one of our unspoken demands. This doesn't mean we abandon standards or accept mistreatment. It means we shift our focus. We stopped tying our peace to whether others meet our expectations. We learn to ask instead, what belongs to me here? I can still give effort, but without the chain of expecting recognition. I can still love, but without the leash of demanding specific returns. I can still set boundaries, but without expecting others to change instantly. When I release the invisible contracts, I release myself from constant resentment. Think of how much lighter life becomes when you stop expecting perfection. When your child makes mistakes, you see them as part of learning, not as violations of your image. When your partner forgets something, you address it calmly instead of spiraling into judgment. When your boss doesn't notice your hard work, you use it as a chance to clarify your goals instead of wallowing in bitterness. Freedom comes not when people finally meet all your expectations, but when you stop needing them to. Here's a paradox worth noting. Lowering expectations doesn't make life dull. It makes it more joyful. When you stop demanding constant recognition, gratitude, and fairness, you begin to see every act of kindness as a bonus. You notice the times your partner does remember, and you savor them. You notice when your child shows growth, and you celebrate it. You notice when your boss does give feedback, and you value it. Life becomes a series of gifts rather than a series of disappointments, and this shift has ripple effects. People feel it when you stop suffocating them with invisible contracts. Relationships breathe easier. Love becomes freer. Work becomes less tense. Instead of living in constant judgment, you start living in curiosity and appreciation. Ironically, this often invites more kindness from others because they sense that you're no longer keeping score. So the next time you feel disappointment rising, pause and ask yourself, what expectation of mine just got broken? Did I ever clearly communicate it? Did the other person ever agree to it? Or did I write it in silence and assume it was binding? Most of the time, the answer will humble you. The world didn't betray you. You betrayed yourself by pretending your private hopes were contracts. Once you see this, you gain freedom. You can still set clear agreements with people. That's healthy. You can still hold standards. That's necessary. But you stop carrying the crushing weight of silent, unrealistic expectations. You stop demanding that life obey your script. And in that release, peace returns. Because in the end, expectations are like chains we forge ourselves. We think they'll keep others tied to us, but they end up binding us instead. Break those chains and you discover something liberating. Life was never meant to play by your rules. But if you accept it on its own terms, it often gives you more than you imagined. If expectation is one trap that fuels our suffering, then ego is the furnace that keeps anger burning. Ego is the voice inside that insists, I must be seen in a certain way. I must always be right. I must always be respected. When reality challenges that image, anger rushes in to defend it. And the more fragile our ego, the louder the anger. Most of the time, anger is not about the event itself. It's about what the event means to our ego. A colleague questions our idea in a meeting, not a disaster in itself, but the ego screams. They're saying I'm incompetent. A spouse points out a mistake not unusual in a relationship, but the ego twists it into, they don't appreciate me. A stranger cuts us off in traffic, not personal at all, but the ego inflates it to. They think their time is more valuable than mine. Anger is rarely about reality. It's about the story ego tells. Think back to the last time you were furious. Beneath the words, beneath the heat, what was really threatened? Chances are it was your image, your identity, your sense of worth. Maybe you were defending your reputation as competent, or your role as a good parent, or your need to feel respected. Strip away the layers, and you'll usually find ego at the core. This doesn't mean ego is evil. In small doses, it can motivate achievement. But when ego dominates, it enslaves us. It convinces us that every criticism is an attack on our survival, that every challenge must be crushed, that every insult must be avenged. Ego turns us into fragile warriors, always on edge, always fighting, always exhausted. And ironically, the angrier we get in defense of our ego, the weaker we appear to others. Outbursts reveal insecurity, not strength. This is especially true in adulthood, when the stakes are higher. In our 30s and 40s, careers are at their peak pressure points. Families depend on us. Communities look to us for stability. And yet, many of us still carry fragile egos from our younger years. A manager who can't tolerate being questioned alienates his team. A parent who explodes at small disobediences erodes the trust of their children. A partner who takes every piece of feedback as an attack poisons intimacy, all because ego insists on constant defense. So what's the way out? The first step is recognition. To pause in the middle of anger and ask, what is my ego defending right now? Is it my need to always be right? My need to always be respected? My fear of looking weak? That question doesn't dissolve the anger instantly, but it shines light on the real source. And once you see it, you can choose. You can remind yourself, my worth is not defined by this moment. My value is not erased by this criticism. My dignity is not determined by their opinion. The Stoics taught this relentlessly. Epictetus reminded his students that insults only harm us if we grant them power. Marcus Aurelius wrote that other people's opinions are just noises carried on the wind. What matters is whether we let them pierce our soul. The ego says, I must crush them to prove myself. Wisdom says, I don't need to prove what is already secure. Here's the paradox. The less you defend your ego, the stronger you appear. The boss who listens calmly to criticism earns respect. The parent who admits a mistake teaches humility. The partner who doesn't need to win every argument creates space for intimacy. Strength is not in the volume of your defense, it's in the stability of your silence. people feel it. They sense the weight of someone who doesn't crumble under challenge, who doesn't explode under pressure, who doesn't need to protect an image because they've anchored themselves in something deeper. But how do you actually weaken the ego's grip? One practice is deliberate humility. To remind yourself daily, I will make mistakes. I will be misunderstood. I will be criticized. And none of that changes my worth. Another is service, shifting your focus from self-image to contribution. When your goal is to serve, criticism becomes feedback, not an attack. And another is perspective, remembering how small most slights are in the vast sweep of time. Will this comment matter in a month, a year, 10 years? Usually not. Ego inflates the moment. Wisdom shrinks it back to size. Consider the metaphor of a mirror. A clean, steady mirror reflects reality without distortion. But a fragile mirror shatters at the slightest touch. When your ego is fragile, every insult feels like a hammer. When your ego is strong, or better yet, when it's loosened, insults bounce off like dust. The mirror stays intact. Your task is not to remove the mirror entirely. You will always care somewhat about how others see you. Your task is to strengthen it, polish it, and refuse to let it shatter every time someone taps the glass. There's freedom in this. Imagine walking into a meeting no longer haunted by the need to appear flawless. Imagine raising children without needing them to validate your worth as a parent. Imagine being in a relationship where feedback isn't a threat but a bridge. That freedom is what comes when ego is no longer the driver of your reactions. The truth is, most of the battles we fight in anger are not with others at all. They're with ourselves, with the fragile images we're desperate to maintain. Once you see that, you can stop wasting energy on defending ego and start investing it in growth. You don't need to win every argument to be whole. You don't need to crush every critic to be strong. You don't need universal respect to be at peace. What you need is to loosen ego's grip, to let go of the demand to always appear a certain way, and to anchor yourself in values that don't waver with opinion. Because in the end, ego is a liar. It tells you anger will protect you, but it only exposes you. It tells you defense will make you strong, but it only makes you brittle. True strength is the calm that doesn't need defending. And once you find it, you discover a power far greater than ego ever promised, the power to walk through criticism, disrespect, even rejection, without losing yourself. Between stimulus and response, there is always a pause. In that pause lies your freedom. In that pause lies your power. Yet most of us live as if no pause exists at all. Someone criticizes us, and before we even realize it, words fly out of our mouths. Someone cuts us off in traffic, and our hand slams the horn before thought can intervene. Someone disrespects us, and anger erupts like a reflex. We act as if life pushes a button, and we must obey. But that's not true. The pause is always there. The question is whether we notice it. Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, who survived the horrors of concentration camps, put it beautifully. Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. If a man enduring that level of suffering could still recognize the space, then we who live in ordinary frustrations certainly can as well. The challenge is that the pause is often small, barely a breath, barely a heartbeat. But it is enough. And if we train ourselves to live in that pause, we transform our lives. Think about your last argument. What would have happened if you had paused for 5 seconds before replying? Perhaps the cutting remark would have softened. Perhaps the defensive tone would have shifted. Perhaps you would have asked a clarifying question instead of firing back. A single pause has the power to change not just the moment, but the entire trajectory of a relationship. Why is the pause so powerful? Because it breaks the chain of automatic reaction. Without it, your past runs your present. Old wounds, old habits, old patterns dictate your behavior. But in the pause, you become conscious. You step into authorship. You see the trigger, you feel the surge, but you choose the response. That is the difference between living as a puppet and living as a person. The pause also gives your nervous system time to settle. Emotions come in waves, and the first wave is always the strongest. If you ride it without reacting, the wave begins to fade. Neuroscience tells us that the physiological surge of anger often peaks and declines within 90 seconds if we don't fuel it with more stories. 90 seconds of pause can save 90 minutes of regret. So how do we practice pausing? Start small. When your phone buzzes with a message that irritates you, wait 1 minute before replying. When someone interrupts you, take 1 breath before speaking. When you feel the urge to correct your child harshly, count to 5 before responding. These small practices stretch the space. They strengthen your awareness of the pause. Over time, the pause grows longer, stronger, more natural. It also helps to anchor the pause in your body. When triggered, notice where the reaction lives. Is your jaw tight? Are your shoulders clenched? Is your chest hot? Instead of speaking from that tension, breathe into it. Drop your shoulders. Relax your jaw. Let your body remind your mind that it doesn't need to react. The body can become the doorway into the pause. In professional life, the pause is invaluable. A leader who reacts instantly to criticism loses credibility. A leader who pauses, listens, and then responds with clarity gains respect. In negotiations, the pause prevents rash concessions and reveals hidden motives. In conflict resolution, the pause allows room for others to de-escalate. People often fill silence with valuable information, but only if you let the silence exist. The pause isn't weakness. It's a form of strategic patience. In family life, the pause can save intimacy. A partner makes a sharp comment. If you respond instantly, the spiral begins. But if you pause, breathe, and choose your words carefully, you break the cycle. A child disobeys. If you react with shouting, you teach fear. But if you pause, gather yourself, and respond with firm calmness, you teach strength. The pause is not empty. It is filled with possibility. For adults in their 30s and 40s, cultivating the pause may be the single most important skill for sustaining peace. At this stage, you are pulled in many directions: career pressures, family demands, financial concerns, social expectations. The temptation to react quickly is constant, but quick reactions often create long-term problems. A harsh word at work damages your reputation. A careless outburst at home wounds your partner. A moment of road rage endangers your safety. The pause is what protects you from yourself. Here's a practical exercise. At the start of each day, pick 1 word to embody in your pauses. Maybe it's clarity. Maybe it's patience. Maybe it's strength. Write it on a sticky note or keep it in your phone. When you feel triggered, recall the word. Let it shape your response. Over time, your chosen word becomes a habit, and your pauses begin to reflect your highest values, not your lowest impulses. It's also important to remember that pausing doesn't mean avoiding. Some people confuse the two. Avoidance is running away from the issue. Pausing is choosing to engage with clarity. You may still set boundaries. You may still speak firmly, but you do so with intention, not reactivity. The pause doesn't erase action. It elevates it. And perhaps most importantly, the pause restores dignity. When you react instantly, you often regret what you said. You feel controlled by the moment. But when you pause, you reclaim your dignity. You may still feel the sting, but you are no longer a slave to it. You stand taller, calmer, more deliberate. Others sense it. They may not say it, but they respect it. Because in a world addicted to speed and noise, the person who pauses radiates authority. So the next time you feel the surge of anger, remember, there is a pause waiting for you. It may be small, but it is there. Step into it. Breathe. Choose. Let the pause be your practice, your shield, your strength. Over time, you'll discover that the greatest victories are not in clever comebacks or quick defenses, but in the simple, steady power of restraint. Because between stimulus and response, there is a pause. And in that pause lies the difference between a life ruled by impulse and a life guided by wisdom. Life has a way of holding up mirrors to us, whether we want to look into them or not. Every interaction, every conflict, every sting of offense is a reflection of something deeper inside. The people around us often act like mirrors, showing us not who they are, but what is still unhealed in us. This is why two people can face the same disrespect and respond in completely different ways. For one, it bounces off. For the other, it cuts deep. The difference is not the insult itself, but the wound it touched. When someone ignores you and you feel invisible, that's not just about their behavior. It's a mirror of your old longing to be seen. When someone criticizes you harshly and you spiral into defensiveness, that's not just about their words. It's a reflection of your hidden fear of inadequacy. When someone betrays your trust and you feel shattered, it's not only about them, it reveals how much of your identity was anchored in their loyalty. The mirror doesn't lie. It shows you where you're still fragile. At first, this idea can feel offensive. We want to believe the problem is always out there. They disrespected me. They made me angry. They broke my heart. But the truth is more uncomfortable. The way we interpret these moments reveals what's unresolved within us. Life keeps sending us mirrors until we finally look. That's why the same themes repeat different faces, same patterns. The colleague who belittles you is a mirror of the same insecurity your older sibling used to exploit. The partner who withdraws emotionally is a mirror of the same absence you felt from a parent. Until you face the reflection, the mirror keeps appearing. This is not about blaming yourself for others' behavior. People are responsible for their choices. Betrayal, cruelty, disrespect, those belong to them. But your reaction belongs to you. The mirror is not there to condemn you. It is there to teach you. It says, look here. Pay attention. This is where your work lies. That shift from blame to reflection transforms suffering into opportunity. Instead of asking, "Why are they like this?" you begin asking, "What is this showing me about myself?" That single question turns pain into practice. Imagine, for instance, a manager in his 40s who constantly clashes with colleagues who question his ideas. On the surface, it seems like they are the problem, but when he looks into the mirror, he realizes the anger is less about the challenge and more about his need to always appear competent. Their criticism reflects his own fragile contract. If I'm smart, I can't be wrong. The mirror is uncomfortable, but it's accurate. Once he sees it, he can begin loosening that contract and respond with more openness. Or think about a parent who explodes when their child disobeys. The surface story is, "My child is disrespectful." But the mirror reveals something deeper. Perhaps the parent grew up in an environment where disobedience led to chaos, and now any hint of it feels like a threat. The child is not just a child. The child is a mirror reflecting the parent's unresolved fear of losing control. Until the parent looks into that mirror, the pattern repeats. For adults in their 30s and 40s, the mirror principle becomes especially urgent. By this stage, you've lived long enough to notice patterns, the same types of conflicts at work, the same cycles in relationships, the same recurring frustrations. If the same story keeps happening, maybe it's not just the world, maybe it's the mirror. And maybe the reflection is showing you the exact area where growth is possible. The Stoics understood this deeply. They saw other people not merely as obstacles, but as opportunities to practice virtue. A rude person was a chance to practice patience. An ungrateful person was a chance to practice generosity. A disrespectful person was a chance to practice dignity. The world was their training ground, every person a mirror of the work still to be done inside. Instead of cursing the mirror, they studied it. And by studying it, they grew stronger. Looking into the mirror takes courage. It requires honesty. It requires admitting that the sting you feel is not just about them, but about you. But once you do, something amazing happens. You stop being trapped. The same disrespect that once ruined your day becomes a signal pointing to where you need healing. The same betrayal that once shattered you becomes a teacher reminding you not to tie your worth to someone else's loyalty. The same criticism that once sent you spiraling becomes feedback about your own fragile ego. The mirror doesn't hurt you. It frees you if you're willing to look. This doesn't mean tolerating abuse or excusing mistreatment. It means separating two truths. Their behavior is theirs. My reaction is mine. I can hold them accountable while still learning from the mirror. I can set boundaries while still growing from the reflection. Strength comes not from pretending others don't affect you, but from using their effect as a teacher. So the next time you feel triggered, pause and ask, what is this reflecting in me? What old story is being touched? What healing is still needed? The answer may be uncomfortable, but it will be illuminating. And with that awareness, you can step out of the cycle. You can stop fighting the same battles again and again. You can stop blaming the world and start transforming yourself. Because in the end, life is a mirror. It reflects not just what's outside, but what's inside. You don't always get to choose the reflection, but you always get to choose what you do with it. And the more willing you are to look, the freer you become. One of the greatest shifts you can make in life is moving from being absorbed in every emotional storm to becoming the observer of it. Most people live as if they are fully merged with whatever they feel. When anger rises, they are anger. When sadness comes, they drown in it. When anxiety grips, it consumes them. They don't just experience emotions, they become fused with them. But there is another way: to observe instead of absorb, to watch instead of merge, to stand apart enough to see clearly what is happening. Imagine watching a movie. When you are immersed, every scene feels personal. You laugh, cry, tense up, even though somewhere deep down you know it's just a story unfolding on a screen. Now imagine you could bring that same awareness into your daily life, watching your anger, your fear, your disappointment like a film. The story still plays, but you no longer mistake it for your entire reality. You become the audience, not just the actor. That small shift changes everything. This is what it means to become an observer of your own mind. You don't deny feelings. You don't suppress them. You watch them. You say, I notice anger rising in me. I notice sadness passing through. I notice fear knocking on the door. That awareness creates distance, and in that distance lies freedom. Suddenly, emotions lose their absolute power. They are weather, not identity. They are clouds, not the sky. The Stoics practiced this daily. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself to step back and see his life from above, like looking down at the city from a hill. From that vantage point, everything shrinks to its proper size. The insult that felt huge is just a passing word in the grand sweep of time. The frustration that seemed unbearable is just a moment in a lifetime. Observation shrinks chaos back to proportion. In practical terms, being an observer means cultivating awareness in real time. At work, when a colleague dismisses your idea, instead of fusing with anger, you observe. My chest is tight, my jaw is clenching, anger is rising. That observation itself interrupts the chain. At home, when your child disobeys, instead of drowning in frustration, you notice, I feel the urge to shout, but I can watch it instead. That act of watching gives you the option to choose differently. This is not detachment in the cold, uncaring sense. It's engaged presence. You still feel, you still care, but you add a layer of perspective. You become both participant and witness. And from that witness seat, you gain clarity. You see patterns you would miss if you were fully absorbed. You notice how often the same trigger sets you off. You notice the stories you tell yourself when you feel slighted. You notice how much of your suffering comes not from reality, but from your interpretation. For adults in their 30s and 40s, this practice can be life-changing. At this stage, responsibilities pile up. Stress multiplies. The margin for reckless reactions shrinks. You can no longer afford to be swallowed whole by every mood. If you merge with anger at work, your career suffers. If you merge with frustration at home, your relationships fracture. If you merge with anxiety, your health deteriorates. Observation is what gives you space. It lets you feel deeply without being devoured. The beauty of observation is that it doesn't require special conditions. You don't need a meditation cushion or a quiet retreat. You can practice it anywhere, anytime. While stuck in traffic, notice your body. While waiting in line, notice your impatience. While listening to criticism, notice the story forming in your mind. Each act of noticing is a rep in the gym of awareness. Over time, you grow less reactive, more steady, more grounded. Of course, the ego resists this. The ego wants to be fully identified with every emotion because that makes it feel important. I am angry, therefore I am powerful. I am sad, therefore I am deep. I am anxious, therefore I am cautious. But these are illusions. Emotions don't define you. They visit you. You are the host, not the guest. And the host has the power to decide how much space each guest is allowed to take. Think of it like sitting by a river. Your thoughts and feelings are the water, flowing by endlessly. Most people jump into the river and get swept away. Observation is choosing to sit on the bank and watch the current. The water still flows, but you remain steady. Sometimes the river rages, sometimes it calms, but you stay seated. That is the power of being the observer. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. At first, you'll only notice after the fact. You'll lose your temper, then later think, I wish I had paused. That's okay. Over time, the gap shortens. You notice in the moment, anger is rising, but I don't need to obey it. Eventually, you notice even before the wave crests, I feel the trigger coming. I can choose now. That progression is the path of mastery. And here's the paradox. Observation not only makes you calmer, it also makes you more compassionate. When you see your own emotions as passing storms, you realize the same is true for others. Their anger is not their essence. Their fear is not their identity. They too are swept by currents. And that awareness softens your judgment. You begin to see people not as enemies, but as fellow travelers caught in storms of their own. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, remember, you have another seat available. You don't have to sit in the chaos. You can sit in the audience. You can watch the storm instead of being the storm. And from that seat, you gain the most valuable gift life can offer. The power to choose how you live, not just how you react. Because in the end, you are not the passing waves of emotion. You are the observer of them. And the more faithfully you practice observation, the freer, wiser, and steadier your life becomes. If observation allows you to step back from your emotions, compassion allows you to step forward toward others without being dragged into their storms. At first, compassion might sound like weakness. Many people equate it with letting people off the hook, tolerating bad behavior, or turning yourself into a doormat. But true compassion is nothing like that. Compassion is not submission. Compassion is strength. It is the ability to see someone's outburst, disrespect, or cruelty not as raw power, but as evidence of their own wounds. It is the refusal to join their chaos while still acknowledging their humanity. Think about the last time someone spoke harshly to you. Maybe it was your boss under pressure, or your partner in a bad mood, or even a stranger snapping at you in public. Your reflex might have been to fire back, to prove that you wouldn't be walked over. But what if, instead, you saw their behavior as pain in disguise? The boss's criticism might be a mask for his own insecurity. Your partner's tone might be a reflection of exhaustion, not disdain. The stranger's rudeness might come from a life heavy with stress you know nothing about. This doesn't excuse their words, but it reframes them. And that reframing is what compassion does. When you choose compassion, you don't deny the sting. You acknowledge it, but you also ask, what must it be like to carry the pain that made them act this way? That question alone changes your response. Instead of escalating, you remain calm. Instead of retaliating, you set boundaries without hate. Instead of absorbing their chaos, you reflect steadiness back to them. Compassion protects your peace while also offering the other person a mirror they rarely see. The Stoics, often misunderstood as cold or detached, actually practiced a profound form of compassion. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that people would be selfish, arrogant, and ungrateful, not because they were monsters, but because they acted from ignorance and pain. He chose not to hate them, because hatred only multiplies suffering. He chose to meet them with understanding, because understanding kept him steady. Compassion, in the Stoic sense, was not sentimental, it was practical. It was armor for the soul. For adults in their 30s and 40s, this lesson is crucial. By this stage, you've seen enough of life to know people carry invisible burdens. The colleague who lashes out might be caring for a sick parent. The friend who withdraws might be battling depression. The partner who grows irritable might be drowning in unspoken fears about money or aging. When you realize that behavior often hides pain, your perspective changes. You stop taking everything so personally. You stop assuming every sharp edge is about you. You begin to see the human underneath the storm. Compassion also frees you from cycles of retaliation. Without it, one harsh word becomes 2, then 10, then days of cold silence. With it, you stop the spiral. You respond with clarity, but without venom. You set boundaries without poisoning the air. You refuse to mirror their chaos. And often this disarms the other person. Not always, sometimes they remain locked in their patterns. But even then, your calmness keeps you from being dragged down with them. It's important to emphasize that compassion does not mean tolerating abuse. You can be compassionate and still walk away. You can be compassionate and still enforce consequences. Compassion is not about letting people do whatever they want. It's about choosing not to let their wounds create wounds in you. It's about protecting your peace while still recognizing their humanity. Boundaries without compassion harden into resentment. Compassion without boundaries dissolves into weakness. But when you combine the two, you become unshakable. Think of compassion as a kind of secret strength. When someone expects you to explode and instead you remain calm, it unsettles them. When someone tries to provoke you and you respond with quiet dignity, it confuses them. When someone treats you with hostility and you refuse to mirror it, it reveals a strength they don't know how to handle. Compassion is not passive, it is active refusal to let pain spread. It breaks the chain of suffering at your doorstep. Here's a practical way to cultivate it. The next time someone offends you, silently tell yourself, "This is pain disguised as aggression." Even if you don't know their story, assume it. Not to excuse them, but to protect yourself. When you see pain instead of malice, your body calms. Your ego quiets. Your response shifts. You can still set limits. You can still walk away, but you do it without poison in your heart. And that difference is everything. Compassion also extends to yourself. Many adults carry deep guilt for past mistakes. harsh self-criticism for present shortcomings, and fear for future failures. Without compassion, you become your own harshest enemy. You punish yourself endlessly, and that punishment spills over into your relationships. But when you practice self-compassion, you give yourself the same grace you would give a friend. You say, I failed, but I am not a failure. I made a mistake, but I am still worthy. That inner kindness steadies you. It gives you strength to grow without shame. And here's the paradox. Compassion doesn't make you softer in a weak way. It makes you stronger in a resilient way. A tree that refuses to bend breaks in the storm. A tree that bends in the wind survives. Compassion is that bend. It's the flexibility that keeps you standing when others fall. People may mistake it for weakness at first, but in time, they realize it is the deepest kind of strength. So the next time you face hostility, remember, you have a choice. You can mirror their chaos, escalating the storm, or you can stand steady, seeing their pain for what it is, refusing to let it spread into you. That choice is compassion. And in that choice lies your freedom, because in the end, compassion is not about excusing others. It's about protecting yourself. It's about refusing to live as a mirror of pain. It's about meeting the world with steadiness, clarity, and yes, even kindness, not because others deserve it, but because you deserve peace. One of the heaviest burdens most of us carry often, without realizing it, is the constant need to prove ourselves. We try to prove we are smart enough, strong enough, successful enough, lovable enough. We want colleagues to respect our competence, partners to admire our devotion, children to see our sacrifices, friends to validate our worth. This endless pursuit is exhausting because no matter how much proof we offer, it never feels like enough. And even when someone does affirm us, the relief is temporary. Soon the cycle begins again. The need to prove comes from insecurity disguised as ambition. On the surface, it looks like striving for excellence, but beneath it lies fear. Fear of being overlooked, fear of being insignificant, fear of not being enough. That fear drives us into constant performance. Every conversation becomes a subtle audition. Every achievement becomes evidence to display. Every disagreement becomes a courtroom where we must argue our case. We live not as free people, but as defendants always trying to win approval. Think about how often this plays out in daily life. At work, a colleague challenges your idea. Instead of calmly discussing, you feel an urgent need to defend, to prove you are not incompetent. At home, your partner points out a mistake. Instead of receiving it, you argue, desperate to prove you are not careless. Even with friends, if someone forgets to include you, you may go out of your way to show you still matter. Each of these reactions drains you because they are fueled not by clarity, but by the ego's obsession with proof. The tragedy is that the more we try to prove ourselves, the less convincing we become. Defensiveness reads as insecurity. Constant self-promotion reads as desperation. Over-explaining reads as guilt. People are rarely impressed by those who insist on their worth. They are impressed by those who carry it quietly, who live with calm confidence that doesn't need to be broadcast. That the Stoics understood this well. They believe that character speaks louder than words. Epictetus reminded his students that true strength is shown in action, not in endless justification. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal, not to persuade anyone else, but to remind himself of who he wanted to be. They lived for inner alignment, not external validation. Their dignity came not from proving, but from embodying. Letting go of the need to prove does not mean apathy. It doesn't mean you stop striving for excellence. It means you shift your motive. You do good work because it aligns with your values, not because you need applause. You love your family because it's who you are, not because you need constant recognition. You speak your truth because it matters, not because you need to win every argument. The energy is different. One is desperate and draining. The other is grounded and free. For adults in their 30s and 40s, this shift is transformative. At this stage, the stakes are higher. Your career, your marriage, your children, your health, they demand steadiness, not fragile ego battles. The need to prove yourself at every turn wastes the very energy you need to build the life you want. Imagine how much lighter your days would feel if you no longer had to win every argument, justify every choice, or display every success. Imagine speaking with calm confidence, letting your actions stand on their own, unshaken by whether others applaud or not. Here's the paradox. When you stop trying to prove yourself, people often respect you more. The colleague who doesn't overreact to criticism gains credibility. The leader who admits mistakes earns trust. The parent who apologizes to a child teaches humility. Strength shows not in endless defense, but in quiet assurance. Others sense when you are free from the compulsion to prove. It creates an aura of stability that no argument can manufacture. Of course, letting go of proving is not easy. The impulse runs deep. It comes from childhood when love often felt conditional. I am valued if I perform, if I succeed, if I behave. That script follows us into adulthood. But scripts can be rewritten. The first step is awareness. When you feel the urge to defend, ask yourself, am I doing this to clarify or to prove? Am I acting from value or from fear? That pause reveals your motive. The next step is practice. Choose small moments to let go. When someone misunderstands you, instead of rushing to correct, let it go. When someone overlooks your effort, instead of demanding recognition, smile quietly and keep moving. When someone underestimates you, instead of proving them wrong, let your results speak in time. These small acts of restraint weaken the ego's grip. Over time, you realize the world doesn't collapse when you stop proving. In fact, it often improves. And don't forget self-compassion. You will slip. You will still defend, still justify, still seek validation. That's human. But each time you notice, you get stronger. Each time you choose silence instead of over-explaining, calm instead of defensiveness, you train a new muscle. Slowly, you build the strength to live free from the exhausting courtroom of constant proof. So the next time you feel the urge to prove yourself, pause. Ask, who am I trying to convince and why? If the answer is fear, let it go. If the answer is ego, let it go. Live your values, do your work, love your people. Let your life speak for itself. Because in the end, the need to prove is a cage you build around yourself. When you finally drop it, you discover something far better than approval. You discover peace. You discover freedom. You discover the quiet strength of a person who knows who they are and no longer needs to convince anyone else. Beneath the need to prove ourselves lies something even more subtle. the invisible contracts we make with ourselves about who we must be. These contracts are not written on paper, and no one else signs them. We create them silently in our minds, then punish ourselves whenever reality dares to break them. They sound like this: if I'm intelligent, I must never be wrong. If I'm kind, everyone must treat me gently. If I'm successful, everyone must admire me. If I'm a good parent, my children must always behave. These contracts feel absolute, but they are illusions. And illusions, when violated, produce anger, shame, and despair. Think about how many times you felt devastated, not because of what happened, but because of what it meant for your self-image. You make a mistake at work. Objectively, it's small, maybe a missed email, a forgotten detail. But if your invisible contract says, competent people never mess up, then the mistake feels catastrophic. Or maybe a friend forgets to call on your birthday. Objectively, it's an oversight. But if your invisible contract says, people who love me must always remember, then it feels like betrayal. The pain comes less from the event itself than from the invisible contract being broken. These contracts form early. As children, we absorb messages from parents, teachers, culture. We learn that approval is tied to performance, love is tied to obedience, worth is tied to achievement. Over time, these messages harden into rules we carry into adulthood. By our 30s and 40s, many of us are living inside prisons of our own making, constantly policing ourselves against breaches of contracts we never consciously signed. Problem with invisible contracts is that they make us brittle. The moment life violates the terms, we shatter. And life always violates the terms. People forget. We make mistakes. Circumstances shift. No one can uphold the unrealistic standards we set. That's why anger flares so often, not because reality is cruel, but because reality refuses to bow to our contracts. The Stoics saw this clearly. They understood that suffering often comes from demanding the world to be something it isn't. They urged people to loosen their grip on rigid self-images and to accept the flow of life as it is. Epictetus reminded his students, when you are offended, remember, it is not the event itself but your judgment of it that hurts you. Invisible contracts are judgments in disguise. They are demands that the world conform to the fragile picture we hold of ourselves. So how do we free ourselves from these contracts? The first step is to notice them. The next time you feel a surge of anger, pause and ask, what rule of mine just got broken? What picture of myself or others did this moment violate? Often you'll find it's not about the event, it's about an invisible must or should. They must always respect me. I must never fail. My child should always reflect my values. Once you name the contract, you expose its power. The second step is to question it. Is it really true that competent people never fail? History is full of brilliant minds who stumbled repeatedly. Is it true that love means never being forgotten? Relationships are complex, and forgetfulness doesn't erase affection. Is it true that good parents have perfectly behaved children? Anyone with kids knows that's a fantasy. When you question the contract, you loosen its grip. The third step is to replace contracts with values. Instead of demanding, I must always be right, you choose the value of humility. I will learn from mistakes. Instead of insisting, people must always respect me, you choose the value of dignity. I will act with self-respect even if others don't, instead of clinging to, my children must reflect me. You choose the value of guidance. I will raise them with love and patience, regardless of how they act in the moment. Values are flexible. Contracts are brittle. Values keep you grounded. Contracts keep you imprisoned. For adults in midlife, this shift is transformative. Many of the crises of our 30s and 40s come not from external reality, but from clashing with our own rigid self-images. We thought we'd have achieved more by now. We thought our relationships would look different. We thought we'd be calmer, wiser, more successful. And when reality doesn't match the contract, we feel like failures. But failure only exists in relation to expectation. If you dissolve the unrealistic contract, you discover that life is not betraying you, it's inviting you to grow. Invisible contracts also poison relationships. When we demand that partners, children, or friends uphold our unspoken rules, we set them up to disappoint us. We punish them for failing to meet agreements they never made. This erodes trust and intimacy. But when we let go of contracts, we allow people to be human. We stop turning relationships into performance arenas. We love them for who they are, not for how well they validate our self-image. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop enforcing contracts, life feels lighter. Mistakes become lessons, not disasters. Forgetfulness becomes oversight, not betrayal. Disrespect becomes information, not annihilation. You stop fighting with reality and start flowing with it. And in that flow, you find peace. This doesn't mean becoming passive. You can still set boundaries. You can still hold people accountable. But you do it from clarity, not from ego contracts. You enforce real agreements, spoken, conscious, mutual rather than invisible, one-sided ones. That difference changes everything. So the next time you feel hurt, pause and ask, was this about the event or about my contract? What rule got broken? Did anyone else agree to it, or did I write it in my head? That awareness alone can dissolve half the pain. Because once you see the contract, you can tear it up. And once you tear it up, you're free. Because in the end, your worth is not a contract to be signed by others. Your identity is not a fragile picture that must be protected at all costs. You are not the image. You are the reality. And reality is always stronger, freer, and more resilient than any illusion. From the time we are young, we learn to wear masks. We put on the polite mask for teachers, the obedient mask for parents, the charming mask for friends, the competent mask for colleagues. At first, these masks serve a purpose. They help us survive, fit in, avoid punishment, gain approval. But over time, many of us forget that the masks are not who we are. We become so used to performing roles that we lose touch with the face beneath. And when that happens, life becomes exhausting, because performing is far heavier than simply being taught by adulthood. Especially in our 30s and 40s, many people are buried under layers of masks. At work, you wear the mask of confidence even when you feel uncertain. At home, you wear the mask of patience even when you're stretched thin. In social settings, you wear the mask of success, carefully curating an image to prove you've made it. These masks may impress others, but inside, they drain you. You go to bed tired, not from the day's labor, but from the endless performance of pretending. The problem with masks is not just exhaustion, it's disconnection. When you live behind them long enough, you lose sight of who you really are. You start confusing the role with the reality. You start measuring your worth by how well you maintain the performance. And when someone sees past the mask or questions it, you feel exposed, even attacked. That's why criticism often feels so devastating, not because the words themselves are unbearable, but because they threaten to pull off the mask we've worked so hard to keep in place. The Stoics warned against this. They valued authenticity, the alignment between what you are inside and what you show outside. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid with regard to external things." In other words, stop worrying about maintaining an image. Focus on reality, not appearance. The Stoics knew that masks are brittle. They crack under pressure. Only authenticity endures. So why do we cling to masks? Because they feel safe. Because they protect us from rejection. Because they let us hide our insecurities. But the safety is an illusion. Masks may shield you temporarily, but they also imprison you. You become dependent on constant upkeep, terrified of being exposed. True freedom comes not from perfecting the mask, but from learning to live without it. Let's make this practical. Imagine a leader at work who feels insecure about making mistakes. So he wears a mask of absolute authority, always confident, always decisive. At first, people respect him, but over time the cracks show. His team sees he can't admit errors, and trust erodes. Now imagine instead that he drops the mask. He admits when he's unsure, asks for input, acknowledges mistakes. Far from losing respect, he gains it. People follow leaders who are real, not performers. The authenticity builds connection. Or think of a parent who tries to maintain the mask of endless patience. Inevitably, the mask slips. They snap, then feel guilt, then try harder to perform again. The cycle is exhausting. But if that parent drops the mask and admits to their child, "I lost my temper, and I'm sorry. I'm still learning too," something powerful happens. The child doesn't lose respect, they gain trust. They see honesty, humanity, reality. For adults in midlife, dropping the mask can feel terrifying. You've invested decades in curating certain images. The competent professional, the strong partner, the reliable friend. But carrying those images forever is unsustainable. If you want real peace, you must begin to set them down. Not all at once, not recklessly, but gradually, intentionally. You practice showing up as yourself without the extra layer of performance. You speak honestly instead of strategically. You admit uncertainty instead of pretending. You ask for help instead of hiding weakness. And here's the paradox. When you stop performing, people often like you more. Because masks may impress, but authenticity connects. People are drawn to those who are real, because being real is so rare. They may not always agree with you, but they'll trust you. They'll sense the steadiness of someone who no longer wastes energy hiding. Of course, dropping the mask doesn't mean abandoning all social graces. It doesn't mean blurting out every thought or ignoring context. It means aligning your inner life with your outer expression. It means no longer sacrificing your truth for the sake of maintaining an image. It means daring to be seen as you are, not as you perform. And this is where freedom lives. The more masks you wear, the more fragile you become. Every interaction feels like a test. Every criticism feels like exposure. But when you live without masks, you're uncheckable. You have nothing to hide, so nothing to fear. You stop living for appearances and start living for reality. So the next time you feel the urge to perform, pause and ask, what mask am I wearing right now? What am I afraid would happen if I took it off? Most of the time you'll find the fear is exaggerated. People won't reject you as harshly as you imagine. And even if some do, the cost is worth it. Because every mask you drop brings you closer to peace. Because in the end, masks may win you approval, but only authenticity wins you freedom. And freedom, not applause, not image, is what your soul has been longing for all along. The Stoics had a practice with a Latin name that sounds heavy, but carries immense freedom. Premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. At first it may sound grim. Why would anyone spend time imagining difficulties, setbacks, or losses? Isn't that pessimistic? Shouldn't we focus on the positive? But the Stoics weren't pessimists. They were realists. They understood that life is full of disruptions, disappointments, and unexpected blows. And they knew the best way to meet those blows was to rehearse them in advance, not as a way of worrying, but as a way of preparing. Imagine walking into a storm without a coat. You get drenched, shivering, miserable. That's how most people enter life's storms, unprepared, shocked, overwhelmed. Now imagine walking into the same storm with a raincoat and umbrella. You're still wet, but you're not undone. That's premeditatio malorum. The storm is inevitable, but your preparation changes everything. In practical terms, it means spending a few quiet moments each day anticipating what could go wrong, not to stew in anxiety, but to build resilience. Marcus Aurelius began his mornings reminding himself that he would meet people who were selfish, arrogant, ungrateful. That way, when he encountered them, he wasn't surprised or offended. He expected it, so it didn't knock him off balance. Epictetus advised students to remind themselves that loved ones could be lost, possessions could be taken, fortunes could vanish. Not so they would despair, but so they would treasure what they had while they had it, and remain steady when loss inevitably came. Think about how this could apply to your own life. You have a meeting tomorrow. Instead of fantasizing that it will go perfectly, you practice imagining interruptions, challenges, maybe even harsh criticism. Then you visualize yourself staying calm, responding with clarity, holding your dignity. Or you anticipate your commute. Instead of hoping for clear roads, you picture traffic jams, reckless drivers, delays. Then you imagine yourself breathing steadily, listening to something meaningful, refusing to give away your peace. When those difficulties arrive, and they often do, you're not shocked. You're ready. For adults in their 30s and 40s, this practice is especially powerful. Life at this stage brings constant pressure, work deadlines, financial responsibilities, family demands, health concerns. If you live expecting smooth sailing, you'll feel blindsided again and again. But if you start the day anticipating turbulence, you navigate it with steadiness. Your children will misbehave sometimes. Your spouse will have bad days. Your boss will be unfair. Your body will ache. These are not tragedies. They are life. And when you meet them with preparation, They lose their power to devastate. It's important to clarify. Premeditatio malorum is not wallowing in negativity. It is not obsessive worry. Worry weakens you because it makes you live the pain twice, once in imagination, once in reality. Preparation strengthens you because it arms you for reality. The key difference is posture. Worry asks, what if this happens to me? Preparation asks, if this happens, how will I respond with strength? One drains, the other equips. Here's a practical exercise. Each morning, take 5 minutes and write down 3 challenges you might face today. A rude client, a delayed project, a conflict with your partner. Then, for each one, write down how your best self would respond, calmly, patiently, with dignity. Carry those responses into the day. When the moment arrives, you'll feel déjà vu. You've already rehearsed it. And that rehearsal gives you the confidence to act with composure. The benefits go beyond resilience. This practice also deepens gratitude. When you imagine losing what you love, your health, your family, your comforts, you begin to cherish them more. Ordinary moments stop feeling ordinary. You savor the hug from your child, the laugh with your spouse, the meal at your table, because you know it's not guaranteed. Nothing is promised. By contemplating loss, you heighten appreciation. Gratitude grows where entitlement once lived. This approach also strips illusions. Many of us live with silent assumptions. My career will keep progressing. My health will remain stable. My relationships will always endure. But reality is not obligated to fulfill those assumptions. By practicing premeditatio malorum, you acknowledge impermanence. You accept that setbacks will come. And when they do, you're less shocked, less fragile, less broken. You suffer less, not because pain is absent, but because surprise is . And here's the paradox. By thinking about hardship in advance, you actually worry less. Because much of our anxiety comes from the unknown, from being caught off guard. Once you've rehearsed difficulties, they lose their edge. You've already faced them in your mind. You know your response. You're steadier. Life stops feeling like an ambush and starts feeling like training. Consider the example of a pilot. Before flying, pilots rehearse emergencies. Engine failure, turbulence, equipment malfunction. They don't do this because they want disaster. They do it so that if it comes, they're not paralyzed. They respond calmly, effectively. That's exactly what premeditatio malorum trains you for. You become your own pilot, capable of steady action even when life shakes violently. For someone in midlife, the stakes are higher. Children depend on your calm. Teams depend on your leadership. Relationships depend on your steadiness. If you collapse every time reality disappoints you, the cost ripples through your entire life. But if you practice anticipating difficulty, you create a buffer, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. You become the calm in the storm, the anchor in the chaos. So tomorrow morning, before your day begins, practice. Say to yourself, today someone will disappoint me. Someone will disrespect me. Something will go wrong. And when it does, I will remain steady. I will respond with patience. I will act from my values, not my impulses. That rehearsal is your armor. Not armor that closes you off, but armor that keeps you free, because in the end, life will always bring storms. You cannot stop them, but you can prepare for them. And when you do, you discover something extraordinary. The storm no longer owns you. You may get wet, yes, but you will not drown. You walk into the day not naive, not brittle, but ready. And readiness, that quiet, steady readiness, is one of the greatest freedoms you can ever know. Anger is one of the most deceptive emotions we face. On the surface, it feels powerful. When anger surges, our voice grows louder, our gestures sharper, our presence heavier. We feel alive, energized, almost unstoppable. Many people mistake this intensity for strength, but look more closely, and you'll see that anger is not strength at all. Anger is the fire of ego, loud, hot, and destructive, but ultimately fragile. It burns bright for a moment, then leaves behind ashes of regret. Think about the last time you lost your temper. Did you walk away stronger? Or did you walk away drained, guilty, embarrassed by your own outburst? True strength is calm, steady, deliberate. Anger may scare others into silence for a moment, but it rarely wins respect. More often, it reveals insecurity. It says, I feel threatened. I feel small. I need to prove I matter. That's why Marcus Aurelius called anger a form of weakness, not power. He saw it clearly. The strongest people are those who do not need rage to assert themselves. Anger often disguises itself as righteousness. We tell ourselves, I'm angry because this is wrong. I'm angry because I care. I'm angry because I won't be disrespected. But peel back the layers, and more often than not, the real fuel is ego. Someone has bruised the image you hold of yourself. Someone has refused to treat you as you believe you deserve. Someone has reminded you that you are not fully in control, and the ego cannot stand that. So it burns, and it calls the flames justice. This is why two people can face the same situation and respond so differently. One receives criticism and reflects calmly. The other explodes. The difference isn't in the words spoken. It's in how much ego is tied to the response. The less ego involved, the steadier the reaction. The more ego involved, the hotter the fire. For adults in their 30s and 40s, anger is especially dangerous. At this stage, life is complex and responsibilities are heavy. A reckless outburst at work can derail your career. A fit of rage at home can wound your partner or children in ways that take years to heal. Anger may feel justified in the moment, but its cost is always higher than you think. And the bitter irony is that the people who anger hurts most are not your enemies. They are usually the people closest to you. So how do we master anger? The first step is honesty. Stop pretending it's noble. Admit that most anger is ego in disguise. Admit that behind the fire lies fear of disrespect, fear of inadequacy, fear of losing control. Once you name the fear, anger loses some of its heat. You see it not as raw strength, but as a signal. Something in me feels threatened. What is it? The second step is observation. When anger rises, don't fuse with it. Watch it. Notice your body, your clenched jaw, your racing heart, your tightened fists. Say to yourself, I feel anger surging, but I am not anger. This distance creates choice. You may still act, but you act with awareness, not compulsion. The third step is to transform anger into clarity. Ask, what value do I want to embody here? Instead of exploding, maybe the value is dignity. Instead of sulking, maybe it's courage. Instead of revenge, maybe it's truth. When you shift from defending your ego to embodying your values, your response changes. You may still confront the behavior, but you do it with calm strength, not fiery weakness. Let's make this practical. Imagine a coworker undermines you in front of others. Ego-fueled anger wants to snap back, to humiliate them in return. But if you step back and ask, what is really threatened here? You may see it's your image of competence. Then ask, what value do I want to show instead? Perhaps it's professionalism. So you wait, gather your thoughts, and later address the issue directly and calmly. The coworker may or may not change, but your dignity remains intact. That is real strength. Or imagine your teenager disrespects you. Ego screams, "You will not talk to me that way." Anger rises hot. But if you pause and ask, what is my goal here? To prove my authority or to guide my child? You realize exploding will only widen the gap. So you take a breath, lower your voice, and calmly enforce consequences. You model self-control instead of chaos. Your authority grows not from fear, but from respect. The Stoics practiced this transformation daily. Seneca wrote extensively about anger, calling it the most destructive emotion. He urged people to treat anger not as a companion, but as a sickness of the soul. His prescription was preparation. Expect that people will disappoint you, and anger loses its surprise. His cure was reflection. Examine the roots of your anger, and it loses its grip. His wisdom was restraint. Act not from the fire of ego, but from the clarity of reason. And here's the paradox. The more you master anger, the less powerless you feel. Most people believe anger gives them control, but it actually reveals how much control they've lost. They hand the steering wheel of their lives to whoever provoked them. But when you refuse to let ego's fire rule you, you take the wheel back. You may still feel the heat, but you drive with steady hands. For those in midlife, this mastery is not optional, it's survival. Your family needs your steadiness more than your fire. Your career requires your clarity more than your outbursts. Your health depends on calm more than rage. The cost of anger is simply too high, but the reward of mastering it is priceless. Respect, trust, peace. So the next time you feel the flames rising, pause. Ask yourself, is this really strength, or is this ego burning? What am I defending, my values or my image? If the answer is image, let it go. If the answer is values, act with calm resolve. Don't let ego's fire consume you. Use the heat as fuel for clarity. Because in the end, anger is not power. It's a flare of fear, a spark of ego, a fire that burns more bridges than it builds. True power is the calm that doesn't need to burn. And when you discover that, you'll never mistake the flames of anger for the light of strength. Again, one of the greatest breakthroughs you can ever make is realizing that while emotions pass through you, they are not you. You feel anger, but you are not anger. You feel fear, but you are not fear. You feel sadness, but you are not sadness. These experiences arise, surge, and fade, but your identity remains larger than all of them. The problem is that most people live as if their emotions define them. When anger comes, they say, I am furious. When despair comes, they say, I am broken. When anxiety comes, they say, "I am weak." But these statements confuse the temporary weather with the vast sky dot. Think of emotions as waves on the ocean. Some days the waves are calm, other days they are wild. But beneath the surface, the ocean remains deep, steady, vast. If you identify with every wave, you'll feel like you're drowning. But if you remember you are the ocean, the waves lose their terror. You can feel them without mistaking them for your essence. Consider how this plays out in real life. A colleague criticizes you, and anger rises. If you believe you are anger, you lash out, creating conflict. If you remember you are more than anger, you can observe the surge without obeying it. Or a disappointment triggers sadness. If you believe you are sadness, you collapse into despair. If you remember sadness is just a visitor, you allow it to pass without letting it consume you. The difference is not in the event, but in the identity you claim. This practice is what modern psychology calls disidentification. It's the ability to step back from the feeling and see it as an experience, not a definition. Instead of saying, "I am anxious," you say, "I notice anxiety arising." Instead of "I am depressed," you say, "I feel sadness moving through me." That small shift in language rewires your relationship with emotion. It creates space, and in that space lies freedom. The Stoics knew this long before modern psychology gave it a name. They constantly reminded themselves that impressions, what we feel and perceive, are not reality itself. Epictetus told his students, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them. Our emotions are not absolute truth. They are interpretations, judgments, reactions. When we forget this, we become prisoners of our feelings. When we remember it, we become free." For adults in their 30s and 40s, this lesson is life-saving. At this stage, pressures mount from every side. Work demands, family responsibilities, financial worries, health challenges, each one stirs emotions daily. If you identify with every feeling, you'll be tossed around endlessly. One bad meeting ruins your whole week. One argument poisons your whole marriage. One setback convinces you your entire life is failing. But if you learn to hold emotions lightly, you gain stability. You can say, "This is frustration. It will pass. This is fear. It will fade. This is sadness. It will move through." Suddenly, you are larger than the moment. Here's a practical exercise. The next time you feel a strong emotion, pause and give it a name. Say out loud or silently, "I feel anger," or "I feel fear." Then remind yourself this is a passing state, not my identity. Notice what happens. The emotion doesn't vanish, but it loses its stranglehold. You've created a gap between you and it. You've reminded yourself that the wave is not the ocean dot. Another tool is visualization. Imagine emotions as clouds passing through the sky. Some are dark and stormy, some are light and fleeting, but all move on. You are the sky, or imagine them as passengers boarding and exiting a train. They come, they stay for a while, they leave. You are the train, not the passengers. When you see emotions this way, you stop fearing them. You allow them without clinging, and they move through more quickly. This shift doesn't just free you from pain, it also deepens your capacity for joy. Because when you're no longer enslaved by emotions, you can feel them more fully without fear. You can laugh deeply, knowing joy is a wave that will rise and fall. and that's okay. You can cry honestly, knowing sadness is temporary, not a life sentence. You can face fear, knowing it's an energy passing through, not a permanent mark on your soul. Freedom doesn't mean numbness. It means safety in the midst of feeling. Relationships also transform when you stop identifying with emotions. If you say, "I am angry," you make anger your identity, and the other person becomes your enemy. If you say, "I feel anger rising," you acknowledge the feeling without making it the whole story. That makes it easier to communicate, to stay calm, to hold the relationship steady. The same is true at work. If you say, "I am overwhelmed," you collapse into helplessness. If you say, "I feel stress moving through me," you still feel pressure, but you stay capable of action. Words matter. They shape identity, and identity shapes resilience. Of course, this takes practice. At first, emotions feel overwhelming. They demand you believe them. They insist, "I am the whole truth." But the more you practice disidentification, the more you see their tricks. You learn that anger is just heat in the body, stories in the mind. You learn that fear is just energy in the chest, images of danger projected into the future. You learn that sadness is just heaviness, memories, longings. They are real experiences, yes, but they are not you. You are the one observing, choosing, living beyond them. So the next time emotion surges, pause and remind yourself, this is passing through. It is not who I am. Feel it fully, but don't fuse with it. Allow it, but don't worship it. Learn from it, but don't be defined by it. That is how you remain free, even in the midst of life's storms. Because in the end, you are not your anger, your fear, or your sadness. You are the one who notices them. You are the sky that holds the clouds, the ocean that holds the waves, the train that carries the passengers. And once you discover that, emotions lose their power to enslave you. They still visit, but you no longer mistake them for your identity. And that realization, the simple truth that you are not your emotions, may be the most liberating discovery of your life. Life will never run out of reasons to provoke you. People will continue to disappoint, criticize, betray, misunderstand, and ignore. Circumstances will continue to shift, jobs lost, plans disrupted, health challenged, relationships strained. If peace depended on the world behaving exactly as you want, you would never find it. The world is not built to cater to our comfort. It is built to test our character, and that means the only lasting peace is the kind you build within. A peace no one can take because it doesn't depend on anyone else. This is the final realization the Stoics were pointing us toward. Uncheckable calm is possible, but only when you stop outsourcing it. For most of life, we've handed our serenity to others. We've said, "Treat me kindly, and I'll be at peace. Respect me, and I'll stay calm. Reward me, and I'll feel secure." But that's not sovereignty, that's slavery. When you let your mood rise and fall with the behavior of others, you live as their prisoner. Freedom begins the moment you take it back. Think of yourself as a fortress. A fortress does not beg outsiders to behave. It does not crumble when the wind howls or the enemy approaches. Its strength comes from its own walls, its own foundation, its own discipline. You, too, can become a fortress. Not cold or unfeeling, but steady and resilient. Life will send storms. People will throw insults. Circumstances will shake the ground, but your inner fortress can stand unmoved, because its strength comes from within, not without. To build this fortress, you must integrate everything we've explored. The recognition that others cannot make you angry without your permission, the practice of self-knowledge, the discipline of disidentifying from emotions, the courage to change your questions, the training that treats every irritation as a workout, the release of controlling others, the surrender of unrealistic expectations, the loosening of ego, the cultivation of the pause, the willingness to see life as a mirror, the choice to observe instead of merge, the practice of compassion, the dropping of masks, the preparation for hardship, the mastery over anger, and the constant reminder that you are not your emotions. Each principle is a stone in the wall. Alone, they help. Together, they make you unshakable. For adults in their 30s and 40s, this vision is not abstract, it's urgent. At this stage, the stakes are too high to be ruled by impulse. Your children watch how you respond to stress. Your partner feels the atmosphere you create at home. Your colleagues notice whether you crumble under pressure or hold steady. Your health reflects the wear and tear of your emotional storms. Every outburst drains you. Every moment of calm strengthens you. You cannot afford to live as a reactor. You must become an author. And here's the paradox. When you stop fighting the chaos outside and master the calm inside, you don't become distant from life. You engage with it more deeply. You can listen without defensiveness. You can love without fear. You can work without needing constant validation. You can parent without turning every disobedience into a personal insult. You can lead without being addicted to applause. Your calm doesn't make you less human. It makes you more capable of living fully. Imagine walking through your days with this presence. Someone insults you, you pause, breathe, and let it slide past. Someone disrespects you, you see their pain, not a threat to your worth. A plan collapses, you adjust with flexibility instead of rage. A loved one disappoints, you respond with clarity and compassion instead of retaliation. In each case, you hold your center. Others may not understand it. Some may even mistake it for weakness. But over time, they will feel it, the gravity of a person who cannot be shaken. And quietly, they will respect it. This is what the Stoics meant by true freedom. Not freedom from difficulty, but freedom from being ruled by difficulty. Not freedom from pain, but freedom from being owned by pain. Not freedom from disrespect, but freedom from handing it power over your soul. When you realize this, you discover that the strongest person in the room is not the loudest, not the angriest, not the one who wins every argument. The strongest person is the one who remains calm, deliberate, unshaken, regardless of what swirls around them. And here's the gift. This kind of peace is available to you right now. You don't need the world to change. You don't need perfect circumstances. You don't need everyone's approval. What you need is the willingness to practice, to pause when triggered, to question your ego, to release expectations, to train daily, rep by rep, moment by moment. Over time, you'll notice the shift. What once ruined your day barely touches you. What once consumed you passes like a cloud. What once felt unbearable now feels manageable. That is growth. That is strength. So as we close this journey, let this be your anchor. The world will always bring storms, But you don't have to live as a storm chaser. You can be the mountain instead. You can stand firm, rooted, and steady, not because life is easy, but because you are strong. Not because people always treat you right, but because you refuse to hand them your peace. Not because emotions never visit, but because you know they are visitors, not masters. And when you live this way, something extraordinary happens. People begin to feel your presence. They sense your calm. They trust your steadiness. They may not always say it, but they will know. Here is someone who cannot be shaken. And in a chaotic world, that is the rarest, most valuable gift of all. Because in the end, peace is not something given to you. It is something you build. It is not fragile. It is not conditional. It is not at the mercy of others. It is yours. And once you master it, no one, not the disrespectful boss, not the ungrateful partner, not the reckless stranger, not even the storms of life itself, can ever take it away. So here we are. We've walked through the storms of anger, the traps of ego, the illusions of control, the weight of expectations, and we've uncovered something deeper. Your peace has never been in their hands. It has always been in yours. Every insult, every disrespect, every disappointment was training, not tragedy. And you've seen now that calm is not weakness. It's power. The kind of power that cannot be taken, only chosen. But knowing this is not enough. Wisdom is wasted if it stays in the mind. The world will test you the moment you close this episode. Someone will irritate you, someone will dismiss you, someone will try to pull you into their chaos. That's your moment. That's your rep. That's the chance to live everything we've talked about. Don't wait for perfect conditions. Don't wait until you feel ready. The practice begins now, with the very next breath, the very next trigger, the very next conversation. And as you practice, remember, you're not walking this path alone. This is what we do here at StoicCraft. We take ancient wisdom and bring it into modern life. We turn philosophy into practice, into strength you can carry into your work, your relationships, your family, your very soul. If you found value in this journey, if you felt even one shift in how you see yourself, then join us. Subscribe, follow, stay connected. Not because the algorithm demands it, but because you deserve to keep building this strength with every step forward. The world doesn't need more noise. It doesn't need more outrage. It doesn't need more fragile egos defending themselves with fire. The world needs people who can stand calm in the storm, who can reflect compassion without collapsing, who can lead by example in their families, workplaces, and communities. The world needs people like you, strong, steady, unshaken. And the more of us who live this way, the more light we bring into the chaos. So here's my invitation. Keep training. Keep watching. Keep asking better questions. Keep building the inner fortress that no insult, no betrayal, no storm can breach. And if you're ready to go deeper, if you're ready to make this not just a moment of inspiration but a way of life, then join us here on StoicCraft. Subscribe, share this with someone who needs it, and commit to the practice. Because peace isn't given, it's built. Strength isn't found, it's forged. And the life you want, the calm, the dignity, the freedom starts with the choice you make right now. So make the choice. Stand tall. Stay calm. Be unshakable. And I'll see you on the next episode of StoicCraft.